Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk to you. And I want to congratulate the organizers for 4 things. 3 things are organizational and 1 is with respect to content. The first organizational thing, with which you probably all agree, is I think it's great to have this conference today and yesterday and tomorrow. I think it's a great achievement. Secondly, it's even better to have this series of conferences. This series of conferences. I think you really established with that happiness research in Italy and beyond in Europe. And thirdly, I think you really placed Bicocca on the map. I mean, when you consider Italy, looking from outside, there are not very many universities that one would know of. There is Bocconi, and you are soon going to overtake it. Then there is certainly Bologna, of course. Then Trento. And Vertorgata, but then that's about it. And I think it is, when you look at the difficulties one has to organize anything in Italy, with all this bureaucracy and this little money, I think it's a wonderful achievement. And the 4th reason I would like to congratulate the organizers is with respect to content. I think Italians really contributed something new to happiness research. They didn't imitate all those Americans. You came with your own idea, which is having relational contacts, having friends, acquaintances, family, and the effect on happiness. And that is unique, and it's wonderful to have that. Now I should apologize myself, because I noticed that the conference is on market and happiness, but my own talk is on well-being and war. And I think war and markets are exactly the opposite. They have nothing to do with each other. But I only apologize to the organizers, because I don't apologize to the public, to you, because I think wars are an incredibly important subject. And we should really look at war in the context of happiness. I think happiness, we can be proud of happiness research. I mean, you are here because you think it is a fruitful topic. We have looked over the years at very many different aspects of happiness research, applied it to very many different things. But one we haven't looked at, namely at wars. And wars happen all the time, almost everywhere. It's rather an exception if a country doesn't at least have a civil war. So it is a topic. However, there's very little research on that. And the reasons you can see here, of course, during wars, people are not normally asked, how satisfied are you with the life you lead? Or how happy are you? Or what is your eudaimonic level? Or anything like that. For obvious reasons, but also because governments would, of course, not accept any results if it's not very, very favorable to the government. So it would be a controlled result, not useful for empirical and theoretical research. And then, of course, another reason is that there are many effects one has to take into account, direct and indirect effects. I would first like to talk about how wars destroy happiness. That is the obvious thing. And I must say, I thought it was the only thing. I thought that's absolutely obvious, that wars destroy happiness to a great extent. And I was at a conference and I made this statement. Then a professor from Yale, a historian, told me that I'm probably wrong, that I'm probably not correct, that there are conditions under which wars raise happiness. And I was totally surprised, but I found it an interesting thought, and so I tried to look at it. So, first I would like to go through some elements why wars destroy happiness. And the first is the psychic costs. We all know about this post-traumatic stress disorder, which is there is a lot of evidence on that in the literature. I don't want to go in it, but it has very negative consequences like crime and, at the end, suicide. So it really leads to very negative consequences. And another thing, very, very obvious, is, of course, the people wounded during a war. Here we have, of course, to consider that people to some extent recover, that after a war, when they are wounded during war, of course their happiness level goes down strongly, but they may recover to some extent, and I think that's something we have to take into account. Then there is the effect of people who have a son or a father or friends or other people they are in close contacts with that die during wars or are heavily wounded. That is, of course, a very important negative factor, war destroying happiness. Now I would like to come to a problem I have. Consider this man on the left, badly wounded. Consider the man at the right. He is dead. Which one of the two is more unhappy? I would say the dead man is more unhappy. It's a terrible fate what the man on the left hand has suffered, but to be dead is even worse. And now the question arises, how do we deal with the dead, the people who are killed during wars? And I think there are two possibilities. We can try to calculate how happy this person would have been if he hadn't been killed. The second possibility would be just disregard the dead. They are no longer living. And in economics and in other social sciences, we only consider the living. The dead are gone, of no interest anymore. So I would now like to first try to look at how can we calculate the happiness of those who were killed. And I think it can be done by looking at an individual happiness function. We have seen many such functions today, and we'll see more tomorrow. So I suggest that we would look at a particular soldier who was killed, let's say a male who was killed at age 24 with a certain education and marital status, etc. And then, in principle, we can calculate how happy he would have been over the course of his life, taken everything else constant. So we can calculate how much happiness was lost. And then we look at how many soldiers were killed. I've here used 1 million, and let's say the average happiness of the soldiers killed is 8, then we would have a happiness loss of 1 million times happiness level 8. It looks funny, but I think on the other hand, if you just consider, you disregard all this. You don't even look at the people who were killed, this million. But they lost their happiness. They would have liked to enjoy this happiness, but couldn't. And I think that is some part of the loss of happiness to society of a war which we should take into account, though it is rarely done. Now we can just look at how is it done today. We disregard the people killed, the no longer living, by definition. We don't even consider them. We just say they don't count. And then, of course, one would still have the suffering of the friends and acquaintances who lost somebody. That would be counted as a reduction of happiness due to war, but not the happiness lost of the people killed themselves. And of course, we have other factors, such as the reduction of income and security produced by the war. So that, for instance, the reduction of income due to war can be relatively easily calculated, because there is a huge literature on the effects of war on the economy. But I would like to stress that even this is only a very small part of the costs of a war we should look at. And I think here we economists are ahead of all others. We should look at the loss of happiness. There are some calculations available looking at what happens when a war takes place, still disregarding the dead. That's a mistake, of course. I didn't do it twice. It's, of course, Alois Stutzer who is sitting here. We try to see what were the costs of terrorism in two quite different areas. In France, you might remember there were some terrorist activities connected, mostly actually in Paris, and we tried to calculate what the size of this effect was. And then we looked at Northern Ireland, where you remember very well that there was a lot of terrorism, and we found out a huge effect of terrorism. We calculated that the compensation one would need in order to be equally happy if there was no terrorism would be 40% of income. I had a huge battle with my assistants because they thought it was far too large, and I thought it was about right. Just think about it. You have a job somewhere in Italy where there is no terrorism and a wonderful life, etc. Then you get an offer to go to Northern Ireland in the olden times when there was a lot of terrorism. How much more would you ask for a wage? And I think to ask for 40% more is quite reasonable, because one really needs a high compensation. Or in other words, terrorism, according to our calculations, has a large negative effect on life satisfaction. Now, this other study on 9/11 is quite interesting because 9/11, of course, didn't happen in the UK, but they look at the population in Britain and calculate the loss of happiness due to this event which occurred previously in New York. And they find, Metcalf, Pauthavi, and Dolan found that the effect was quite substantial. So there is even a transfer across countries. Then there is a very nice study of Welsh in Kyklos in 2008. He looks at various countries, but only at a particular kind of war, at civil wars, and he finds a large effect on life satisfaction again. Now the question is, I come back to my basic problem. You remember, my basic problem was, what do we do with these two people? Should the one poor chap who is dead, should we totally disregard him or not? And my conclusion is, I do not find it acceptable that we disregard all those poor chaps lying there. Because also, it gives the wrong incentives to governments. If a government, as you know, there are a lot of governments that now try to pursue a happiness maximizing policy. If you accept that by definition disregarding the well-being of the killed, you should say the government should kill those who are have a below average happiness. And then the happiness goes up and everything is wonderful. And just because we do not look at those poor chaps who were killed. So I don't think that what we do today is acceptable. Now, I think this can be generalized, and I owe this generalization to Lasse Steiner. I think it's not only those people who are killed during wars, I think more generally, people die prematurely for some reason. And if a lot of people die, for instance, for crimes, I think we, happiness economists and happiness researchers, should take that into account and not say, wonderful, they are dead, we forget them. Because if they are very heavily wounded, or are in a wheelchair, we count them. Only if they are really dead, we don't count them anymore, which is very funny. Then a second generalization is governments may have, and I already hinted at that, an incentive to get rid of people who are below average in happiness, and so may raise the happiness. You might now think that is a funny idea. Governments won't do that. No, they do. You know that whenever we happiness economists talk about happiness, somebody always comes up and says, in Bhutan, they maximize the gross happiness index. Exactly in Bhutan, they kicked out the Bhutanese of Nepalese origin. They just kicked them out. And probably they were below average happiness, and so the happiness level of Bhutan rose. You see, governments do these things, and we happiness economists shouldn't support that. Now comes the part where I was personally totally surprised, namely that war is under some circumstances able to raise happiness. You see here, a lot of people say real solidarity is only during war. everybody helps everybody else. True, that is true. Then, during national wars, national pride is larger than ever under other circumstances, and then there's this common purpose, this great task. We have to win this war, and then everybody marches in the same direction, and that makes obviously some people happy. And then also you have perhaps even the personal experience. For some people, a war is the greatest event in their lives. That is the event of their life. Therefore, very often when you speak to people who were in a war, they talk about war stories in a very positive way, in a surprisingly positive way. You see, I'm not for these things, but that's, I think, what we happiness researchers should take into account, that it does exist and that we should take it into account. Then there is combat flow. Martha Nussbaum, I couldn't attend her lecture, but I was told, and I read an earlier paper of her, the happy warrior. In other words, there is combat flow. It's a short-term effect, of course, going back to Csikszentmihalyi. And if you look at classical Greece, you remember when you read that in school, Achilles and Odysseus and Ajax and all these people really enjoyed going into war and to kill each other. That's the Iliad. That's the story. Somewhat surprising. I mean, a lot of people died, but that didn't obviously diminish the combat flow of those people. Then Christian knights during the Middle Ages greatly enjoyed war. They even imitated war. There were not even sufficient wars for them. They imitated wars in their tournaments. A normal tournament was not what we see in the pictures, that two knights meet each other, and then one falls down. That's not what tournaments were about. Tournaments was melee. On each side, 50 or 60 people or 100 people battling against each other and, of course, hurting each other. And then the church came and forbade it because too many people were wounded. They seemed to enjoy war. Then, of course, the samurais enjoyed war. And here, the modern soldiers seem to enjoy war. And there, please, not always, under some circumstances. And it's well documented. There is very good evidence on the Vietnam War and on the Iraq War. And the typical sequence is, before going into a battle, the soldiers are terribly afraid. They hate that. And then, after a time, all of a sudden comes this combat flow, and they start to enjoy killing the adversary. Terrible, but that's what is observed. And Tolstoy and Jünger wrote exactly on that for the Napoleonic Wars and for the First World War. Now, the question is, of course, should we accept such a feeling, such as combat flow? Hassani, Sen and John Stuart Mill and others, and again, Martha Nussbaum wrote about that, found that this is not acceptable, that we should just say, if somebody has such a bad feeling of joy, of killing other people, we should just say, we disregard that. We just decide to disregard it. That is a possibility, but it's a definitional thing, more or less. I think that a better way would probably be to reconsider what happiness is, that we have under different conditions, that we should concentrate on different kinds of subjective well-being. Of course, Alois Stutzer and I have always worked with life satisfaction, and we enjoyed that very much, but I think we should also take into account that life satisfaction works well in the arenas we looked at, but when we come to war and perhaps other deep aspects of life, perhaps we should pay more attention to eudaimonia. War destroys happiness and war raises happiness. And now the question is, again, how do we deal with the killed? And I think that opens a lot of issues. And I would like to invite you to do research on such issues, because I think that there is a certain diminishing marginal returns of doing work in the accepted parts of happiness research. I mean, unemployment decreases happiness and life satisfaction. Yes, yes. And then we can do all kinds of things about unemployment and life satisfaction. But I think we should also work on this huge area of this constant national and internal wars we have, and to see how they are related to happiness. And I think it's a very fruitful area of research. For instance, only the question are the costs in terms of happiness of a national war where one nation fights against another nation's different from an internal civil war? And I think my intuition would be civil wars are even worse than national wars, because in national wars, the national pride is raised, and that makes some people happy, while in internal struggles, that is not the case. And terrorism would be another aspect which is, I think, different from national wars and civil wars. I hope that I have given you some ideas for a new research field. As you see, it's absolutely open, and I look forward to your comments and critique. Thank you. Oh, and I would like to add that after having looked at the evidence, I still think that Goya is absolutely right. War is a terrible thing. And don't misunderstand me when I said that there are some positive aspects. My conclusion is still this one, but we should have better evidence.